I guess when I was growing up, I didn't think you could be confident and then also struggle with your mental health. So
Right.
I think
Yeah,
maybe
good
that was
point.
actually part of the reason that I felt that, well, there's nothing wrong. So I guess I thought that those two things were mutually exclusive. So I think maybe that's why I struggled for so long just by myself. I just didn't know that was an option, I guess, to talk to somebody about it.
That is an aha moment. And it makes so much sense then that you are confident, you're doing all these great things, and that shouldn't be happening then, all the mental health challenges. Hi again, Darian Hooshi.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you today?
Good. Full disclosure is this is our second interview together because I
Yeah.
wanted to follow up with you. You know what? I've just got notes here. You and I met June 15th of 2024. We're now in February of 2025, and our episode dropped number 12 on July 12th.
Wow.
I checked that.
Long time.
I know. So you and I before talked about depression, and you were candid about it. And I have promised you that I'm changing this because I actually want to do a follow-up with you about your life now in kind of corporate world, work and making your way up the ladder. And you're going to be a CEO one day. You are.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping. That's a path, hopefully.
I wanted to also get back to my roots of students. So that's another reason I wanted to go back to you is I actually want to do student interviews still with wherever I'm at because I think it brings so much depth. So enough about me. Let's talk about you. You were allowed to recap, I think, about things I taught you in grade 7.
All I remember about grade 7 is how to make coffee with a bodum.
That's right.
So that's all I remember from that.
Do you know even, so I taught you in French immersion grade 7 and that coffee thing, I think you know this went over to my psych unit where we didn't have the bodum, but we had an espresso, right? And they got
Better.
one a day. They got their own espressos. You in grade 7 just made coffee for me. And you know what's so fascinating is it pulled them in. It pulled them in. So, do you know I want to write a book? I could write a book called It's Not About the Coffee. Right? It's not about
That's
the coffee.
interesting.
Right?
Yeah,
It's true.
an interesting theme throughout your career.
So, Darian, can you tell me about your experience in regards to mental health and how you presented throughout high school in your very academic, high achieving high school with a whole bunch of lawyers and doctors and CEOs and a very intense community?
Yeah, I guess I don't know how I presented. Because I thought, especially when I was younger, that my struggles with mental health, that was just the default experience. I didn't know that was abnormal, to have some of those thoughts and feel that way. So I guess for me, like, I've always been a pretty extroverted, outgoing person. A lot would even go as far as calling me loud. But I guess for me, I didn't really understand my mental health at that time. I didn't really know that you shouldn't feel that way all the time. So for me, I just had the mentality of, well, if everyone's feeling this way, well, then who am I to complain about it? Who am I to make a big deal about it? I shouldn't play the victim here because this is what everyone feels. So I guess to answer your question, I don't really think I did anything. I just kind of kept everything inside because I just thought that's how it was. That's how people live their life, you know? As you grow up, you're an adult. This is just what it is. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I'll tell you, well, I didn't want to interrupt you,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll tell you how it presented. You were confident. You were like the center of the school. You were grade 12 class president, and you presented very, very well. And you were struggling on the inside and nobody knew it, right?
I mean, your words, not mine, but no.
Am
I
I
guess,
wrong? I'll tell you how you presented. I'm confident on how you presented because I saw you. I take students and I watched you give tours to my students. So I'm confident on how you presented.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've never been a shy person. Like, I like to think I'm pretty confident. I guess, like, on that note, I guess when I was growing up, I didn't think you could be confident and then also struggle with your mental health. So
Right.
I think
Yeah,
maybe
good
that was
point.
actually part of the reason that I felt that, well, there's nothing wrong because
Mm-hmm.
look, like, you're such an out there person. Like, you like socializing, you like, you know, you don't mind being in front of an audience and saying whatever needs to be said. So I guess I thought that those two things were mutually exclusive. So I think maybe that's why I struggled for so long just by myself. I just didn't know that was an option, I guess, to talk to somebody about it.
That is an aha moment. You and I didn't talk about this last time. You and I have talked a lot about your mental health, but you've not
Mm-hmm.
said to me that you were confident. Like I saw you confident. I saw you in front of the entire school of 1,600 kids. And it makes so much sense then that you are confident, you're doing all these great things, and that shouldn't be happening then, all the mental health challenges.
Yeah, and I guess you're right. That first time I've kind of considered that. But I guess growing up, I didn't know what good and bad mental health was. So I just assumed that bad mental health meant, a certain kind of archetype or a certain kind of, imagery kind of comes into your mind from like the movies about what
Totally.
depression might look like. It's raining outside, walking around in the puddles, just head down and, like closed
Mm-hmm.
off. But I guess I was naive to the fact that there are some incredibly successful, confident, and well-spoken people who struggle with their mental health. Like one of the all-time greats, Robin Williams.
Yeah.
He could control an entire auditorium, but obviously we know how that story went. And I guess as I've aged, I've kind of realized that those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a confident, um, but you can also
Mm-hmm.
struggle with your mental health at times. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important to note.
It's such important dialogue, because if we walk under the assumption that I am confident, I'm doing really well in life, I shouldn't be feeling anxiety or depression, then you're not able to ever target it, to
Yeah.
really face it and confront it.
Yeah.
I've talked about you after our other interview. I asked your permission to have you up on a slide on my presentations, particularly to the academic schools I speak to. So you went to UBC, you did a neuroscience hotshot degree, and I heard about this. And, we said this last time we talked, is I asked you to help me with the neuroscience because I'm history French and that all freaked the bejeebers out of me. But what struck me is when you were looking at it, and my results, like, duh, students just need support, understanding, and care. You had told me your story, like with high school, and that's what you needed was all the stuff that these kids at a psych unit, at an end of the road unit needed. So I think it's such a powerful story of you were kind of like on that pedestal and nobody knew what was happening and you hadn't recognized just because you were so high up. My words.
Yeah, I guess it's when I read your paper initially, as I was going through to add the edits, it seemed almost obvious to me. It's like, wait, this
Right.
hasn't been
Totally.
spoken about before? Like, this isn't already
No.
common practice? It's one of those things where, like, when you really sit and think about it, it's like, oh yeah, like, there is that disconnect. It's a little bit, corporate's the wrong word, but it's a little bit disconnected between the students and I don't even know how to kind of describe it, but why don't we have a better understanding of the people we spend 90% of our time with, like growing up? I spent more time obviously at school than, pretty much anywhere. So why is that the place that there's a lack of understanding? There's a lack of digging a little bit deeper. And I want to make it clear. I don't think that, every teacher and every environment in school needs to be a therapy session. But that said, I definitely feel like your research on understanding, care, why is that not the default setting? I don't know.
Well, and as you know, I've said this is universal. It's what I needed when they closed down my psych unit: support, understanding, and care. I want to shift then. So let's move away from school years. You got into UBC, and that's where, though, you said it really hit the fan, right? You had growing anxiety, depression. It's where you got a diagnosis, where you really got proper care.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I got proper care,
Okay,
but that's
quote
when I
unquote.
first started to have
You got
the
care.
conversation, open the dialogue.
Yeah.
So after my first year of university, I wasn't doing too great, and I thought to myself that, okay, this doesn't feel right. Like, I've thought my whole life that this is the default setting and that everyone experiences this, but I don't even know what the epiphany was. But I came to the conclusion of this isn't right. This is not how everyone lives their life day after day. So I decided to go speak to some professionals about it, figure it out, and it's actually really funny because I remember the way those diagnoses go. It's typically a questionnaire based on, like, in the
Mm-hmm.
last 2 weeks or in the last month, how many times have you experienced X, Y, and Z? When we were going through my results, I was more surprised that the clinician was surprised that I thought this was normal. So I guess that kind of goes back to your original point about understanding. I was so incredibly disconnected from what
Mm-hmm.
good and bad mental health looks like that I just thought bad mental health was normal and totally okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what you knew though. It's what you knew. And it was also an environment where it's not really talked about. Like, I want to gently say that mental health is not a really, normally, it's not a very high concern for the schools that are super academic. I'm just going to say that very anecdotally, my experience has been those really academic schools are academic. And you can have that focal point a lot more. And I say that gently, but at any rate, I want to now talk about you at work because you graduated neuroscience, which just like makes my head spin. And since you and I spoke, you've now got into, when I say corporate, I mean like just the working world that's not maybe a nice public servant like a teacher like me. Like I'm not corporate. Do you know what I mean? Like you can rise the ranks. You're on a trajectory to do who knows what with your life and your brain and your strengths. So this is when I say corporate, what I mean. So I want to shift now and everything into where you're at now and you navigating your own wellness in the working world and kind of a bit of a, I think is it fair to say that you're in a competitive area of work where everybody wants to rise the ranks and everybody wants to do really well and
Yeah,
have that success?
yeah, I'd definitely say that the culture of the company is very competitive, but that's because
Mm-hmm.
we're in the world of competitive.
Right.
So that all, like, I'm happy to be at a very competitive place. I guess what's really been important for me, in terms of finding a home, finding somewhere that I feel really comfortable and really good about showing up every day,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is this goes again back to understanding. It's being on the same page. I think there's a lot of heartache and a lot of pain that comes from having a difference in standard and a difference in expectation. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with going somewhere that's incredibly competitive and has an incredibly high standard. I think the issue there, and where people put too much pressure and stress on themselves on, is they'll go somewhere that is extremely competitive, that is extremely high pressure, but that's not what they want. They want comfort. They want to be able to relax. They want to be able to chill.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really what I want. Like I'm not looking to be very comfortable per se. Like I want to do the hard work to grow my career, to be able to advance. So I've had a great time in the corporate world because my expectations and my desires of what I wanted matched very well with the culture of the company.
You're with a good company, right? That values wellness and treats employees well, right?
I like to think so. Yeah.
Yeah, they seemed really good. They seemed really good. So this is where I want to talk about today, though, is for people that are in workspaces and you're navigating mental health, what does that look like? And I want to know what you can, like what we can talk about and you can share with me about navigating that. Because I've watched you go from on my tech committee to, doing really well in high school, getting a really great degree in a very competitive university and starting now, what you 24 or 25 yet?
25 in a couple weeks.
Couple weeks. I was not too sure if it had happened yet. Just you are embarking now on your career just in the last few years. So one sec, I'm just reading mine. I'm gonna delete this. Here's my first question about that. Does the process of caring for your own wellness change from high school to university to say corporate?
Yeah.
And how?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning. I don't think I have that all figured out just yet. So I think I'm still kind of learning on that. But what I think is different and what I really appreciate about the company I'm at and why I love it so much is I'm treated like an adult. I felt that like in high school, obviously you're a kid. Like I'm not making it seem like I'm an adult in high school. I'm a kid. But I think the way you treat people is going to be how they respond. So what I mean by that is as an adult and being in the corporate world, when I got hired, I asked people around like, hey, like what's the expectation? Like when do I come? When do I go? Like what's kind of vibe with that? And well, the manager that hired me said, "Well, Darian, we hired you because we thought you were smart, competent, and hardworking. So I think you can figure that part out. Like, just, your meetings are at this time, get your work done around that, and you take care of you however you know best, because you know yourself best."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I've perfectly figured out how to best take care of myself yet. But what I do appreciate, and what I think is very different between high school, college, and the corporate workplace, is the amount of ownership you have over
Yeah.
your own wellness. I think
Yeah.
I'm more empowered and more enabled to be able to live my life the way I want to live it versus having to fit into somebody else's schedule, somebody else's time. Now, that said, I'm extremely fortunate that I'm working at such a progressive place, at a startup that has that kind of policy. And I do realize that a lot of corporate places, they don't have that. It's clock in, clock out.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you got to do. So I don't know how generalizable my take here will be, because I'm so fortunate and living in a place that has such a flexible work-life balance.
So here's what strikes me though as you're talking is you now at almost 25 have more at stake. You've got more at stake. You could get fired. You could not get a promotion. You could potentially later not pay a mortgage one day when you own a home. Like, it just feels to me it has the potential for so much more stress in this big bad world of adulting. What do you think about that?
I disagree.
Okay.
I,
Because
I because I don't want to sound conceited or cocky or anything, but I guess as I've grown up, I've also developed a self-belief in I'll figure it out.
okay.
Deal me whatever cards you want. I'll play it the best I can. And I think that honestly, having my university experience be, you know, completely thrown on its head with the COVID pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
I think it really taught me resourcefulness, and
Right.
it taught me how to self-sustain. It taught me how to figure things out amongst ambiguity. So I guess to kind of bring it back to that question, I don't really feel the pressure or the stress because I have self-belief in myself of
Right.
I will figure it out. So just give me enough time and I'll get it done.
This is your own self-confidence and self-worth talking. This is like deep intrinsic self-worth and self-confidence talking, because I wouldn't get that response from everybody at all. And I haven't. So I think that you had a good starting point, which is interesting then too with the mental health challenges that you've had, right? Like you said, of that not going together. I have a side question for you. I want to know, and you and I've talked a lot about this, but I'm curious to know how you feel about the influence of social media pressure in the work world in your teens, your Gen Z.
Yeah, I mean everyone's kind of commented on it, but social media is not real life, and I think it's very, pardon me, I think it's difficult for a lot of people my age especially, and this is something I struggle with as well in terms of I feel like I'm behind. I feel
Mm,
like I'm chasing something and I'm not leading the pack. I'm near the back and I want to get myself to the front.
mm-hmm.
And I think what social media does is that it perpetuates that thinking, because you'll be able to see the highlights. You'll be able to see the people that are at the head of the pack, so to speak. It'll create that desire of wanting what others have. The grass is always
Mm-hmm.
greener type of mentality. So it's been difficult. Like I really try to acknowledge that and make sure I'm not, going down that slippery slope. But I think social media definitely creates almost a sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what other people's feeds look like. Maybe they look a little bit different than mine, but that's something I got to definitely work hard on, is not let social media influence my path. Everyone's path is going to be different, and I think social media makes it seem like the destinations are all the same, but it doesn't
Good.
acknowledge that
Yeah,
those
that's
paths
good.
are different to get there.
Right. You know, you and I have not spoken about this yet. You and I have been messaging and you've been helping me on LinkedIn, right? Because I started paying a subscription because of you. And my term about all social media after just jumping in October, so October, 4 months now, is never enough. It's kind of what you just said. Like, you're never enough. You don't have enough followers. You don't have enough posts. Like, I'm being more open about dialoguing about this.
Mm-hmm.
That of any experience I've had with social media is never enough. And LinkedIn might be the hardest. And you see what promotion other people are getting, right? That you're not getting, or how they're rising the ranks or their followers or whatever. But it's a whole other side dialogue. I think it's a big one that I think we need to be talking. I've had a lot of 20-some-year-olds saying we're not talking about it.
Yeah, I think what's been really useful for me, Suzanne, is this one quote I heard a couple years ago that really kind of changed my perspective. And I think about it often, but it's that luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I used to think I was a pretty unlucky person until I heard that quote, and it made me realize that I can only control one of those levers, and that's the preparation. So what's given me a sense of calm, and kind of going back to the whole like pressure of work or the stress of it, the stakes, I can only control my preparation. The opportunities, they'll come and go. I have a sense of peace, a sense of calmness around acknowledging I can control what I can control. Everything else is just noise around that. So a little bit of a digression there, but that's what that made me think of.
Right. No, that's true. Okay, so you've been candid at work about depression and anxiety. You know, I've said before, though, it's the depression that's kind of more stigmatizing, whereas anxiety, everybody has it, and it's kind of cool. Right? Like I talked to you about depression because nobody would talk to me else about depression back in June. And you also did that LinkedIn post where you came out with our episode, which was a big deal for you, right? To make that decision.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. We did dialogue a little bit about it, and we had some Japanese food over it.
Yeah. I guess what was difficult for me was that I had some cognitive dissonance between who I said I was and what my behaviors actually were. And I'm someone who says that I'll advocate for mental health. I'll have the conversations. I'll be available for my friends when they need me. But then I wasn't willing to go public with the episode we recorded. And I felt some fear brewing, a little bit of anxiety, so to speak. So that took me some time to kind of think about, get comfortable with. But I realized that, well, if I'm that person who says I stand for these things, I believe in these things, well, then my actions have to reflect that. I can't speak out of one side of my mouth and then go do something else. So I felt that it was incumbent upon me to post it. Because if it's what I stand for, if it's what I believe in, well, then I better put my money where my mouth is. But it was definitely intimidating to be that vulnerable with so many people. And it's not just your close friends and your colleagues, but it's your entire network. Like it's prospects, it's clients, it's a lot. So
it is, and it's out there.
It's out there.
Can't take it back. This is what I talked about. Remember before we decided you were going to post on it, is you can't take this back. It is out for the world to read about that you have struggled with depression.
Yeah. And it's it's very difficult being that vulnerable, especially this junior in my career. Like if I was already a CEO and I'm talking about it, well, it's still vulnerable. It's still like a useful thing to bring up. And I applaud the extremely successful people who do have those conversations and are that vulnerable. But I don't know. I just felt almost like fearful of posting it. But you have to overcome those emotions and those feelings and not let that almost adrenaline rush control you of, do I, don't I? So
yeah. I'm actually scrolling of what you said to me.
Oh yeah?
Can I read it?
Depends what. We might have to cut it out.
We could cut it out. It's actually not that bad. You said it's definitely nerve-wracking being vulnerable like this. I can't lie. And you said actually, hold on. I'll delete that part out. You told me, not sure I feel very empowered right now. More that I'm a man of my word. And if I say, this is what struck me, I say I believe about talking about mental health and advocating for those conversations, then I better be willing to do it myself. I just read that word for word. I found it. Wow.
Yeah.
You're right. Like you're so junior in this trajectory. It's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today and do kind of our follow-up, because you chose very young in a world that you could aspire to go very high up in a career and positions, that you're jumping in. You jumped in.
Yeah. I wrote it really well in that text message. I was kind of rambling about it.
I didn't make that up. That's word for word.
That was nice.
I'll screenshot it if you want.
Maybe that was AI generated. I don't know, but
I hope not.
No, it wasn't. But yeah, no, I think that labels it accurately. Nerve-wracking, didn't feel empowered for sharing my side of my experience.
Yeah.
Just felt nervous. But, with some time, a couple deep breaths, everything turned out all right. And funny enough, I had certain people reach out to me after some time of not speaking, where being that vulnerable and posting that started a conversation. And
Right.
that made me feel great that I'm a man of my word now. I am having those conversations. I've started those conversations, and I'm always available. My friends know this. Like, I'm always there for them for these conversations. But that kind of opened it up to almost a new, like, group of people as well that felt like they were safe enough to have the space to be able to discuss those very hard topics.
Okay, so then this is my big question. Like, this is kind of maybe my big question for you is you came out at work, people at work posted on LinkedIn about it, commented for you. How has it been for you at work? And I want to know, has it hindered anything first? Has there been any hindrance from being vocal about it? Okay.
Not
so
in the
how,
slightest.
all right. So, and that's what you were worried about?
I don't think I was worried about that in terms of, like, would there be repercussions at work? Like, I work somewhere that's very open, very progressive. So I wasn't fearful for that. I guess the fear was more judgment. It was more your peers and how they would think about that. It's like, oh, I guess I don't have a good way I can't find my words to describe it, but I think it was just a little bit of nervousness about how others in my network would perceive me, not necessarily related to work.
Yeah. Here's the thing, I hadn't thought of this until right now is, I don't know if I've told you the statistics on your generation's mental health.
No, but I've heard them elsewhere, and I know it sucks.
It's global research from 2010, Gen Z, 1995 births and onward, have had up to double the mental health disorders as before 2010. And this was a global study of 1 million youth. So I just realized you're in a world where probably so many are struggling with some sort of mental health challenge and not talking about it. Yet you're in the pool of any demographic, like age demographic, that statistically speaking struggle the most. So you've put it out there you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I guess, but I have some opinions on those statistics in terms of, I think there's a lot of things that could cause that uptick. I'm nowhere near qualified enough to really dive deep into that right now, but I guess when I was posting that stuff, that wasn't in my head. I wasn't thinking that my generation is going to be the most receptive audience to this.
I wasn't either when you and I talked about you posting about it. It was off my radar.
Yeah, I don't think that was a key consideration for me. I think I was just a little fearful at the time, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so tell me then, what have been for you the benefits and the rewards, and I say that in more of a deep intrinsic way, at work in this culture where you're starting out, right, wanting to head up the hill? What have those been?
Could you rephrase your question?
Sure. So as you are beginning your career and you were very candid about struggling with mental health, what have the outcomes been in benefits and just all of the deeper intrinsic, sorry, now I'm mixing my words, right? All of just those deeper intrinsic rewards that you have been so candid about this in the workplace. Like you've said, conversations, people reached out to you and conversations.
I wouldn't say, I don't think anyone specifically from work reached out to me about that specific topic. More other people I haven't spoken to in some time, some high school friends, university friends, that kind of stuff. But in terms of the effect at work, I like to think that let me rephrase. I'd like to think that I'm a candid person, generally speaking.
Okay.
So I think I've been trying to present myself that way, just generally. Like, I like to be transparent. I like to be open. I don't like to necessarily hold my cards that close to my chest. I think that doesn't really benefit anyone.
Yeah.
In terms of an effect post that episode, I don't know if there was one, if I'm honest. It's a little bit hard for me to comment on because, one, I'm kind of in the eye of that storm. I'm kind of in the middle of it all. So it's hard to make sense of what did or did not happen. But then two is, I don't know if it had that big of an impact at work, if I'm honest. I'd have to go back and look at who engaged with the content, but I think it was a decent mix of colleagues, but also just people I know from outside of the workplace. So I guess I don't know how it's had an effect.
I have an opinion. It
Yeah.
just came to me. Here's
Yeah,
my opinion. When you are willing to take the risk and be vulnerable, to talk about your own mental health challenges that are still taboo and are still fearful, you are putting yourself in a position of authenticity in a very inauthentic world. It just came to me. You are bringing authenticity to who you are in a space that I believe is very inauthentic. People think of how we want to portray ourselves. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm doing great. Yes, I'm going to become CEO. Look at LinkedIn. I've argued, and people disagree with me, that posts can be curated. People go through AI to get SEO friendly, language. And so when you're willing to be that vulnerable, you're bringing authenticity to the table.
I guess I didn't really look at it from.
I just thought it just hit me like it just right. Like you're being authentic in an, I believe, an inauthentic world. Social media has made everything so much more inauthentic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally I hear ya, and I mean I try to be authentic. I try to be candid, I try to be open, transparent, but I guess I don't really have a comment on that. I have to think about it more.
You too, I know, right? I just hit you with that. You can think about that. And I'm curious to know if that is a benefit or if I'm just like blowing that out of my butt. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know that people want authenticity. I know like even social media is changing where people want like to see a face because we want authenticity because AI is making it 10 times more inauthentic and we're not done yet with AI. Where we're headed.
Yeah, well, maybe you should interview my boss for the answer to that question.
Oh, really? I'm sure he has a lot to teach me. She. Before we do,
actually.
okay.
Thank you.
And you can check this again, by the way, right? Before him. All right. Before we go to the wrap-up questions, I want to know how you have been just handling mental health to safeguard your own wellness as you have embarked upon a career. Like, can you give me tangible ways or broader ways of how are you safeguarding? Because I really feel that there is a safeguarding that needs to happen with not just wellness, but particularly people that have struggled with mental health.
Yeah, I don't think I've done anything drastic. We kind of spoke about this on the last episode, but I think what was really key for me, and this is something that I learned somewhat throughout university and doing my degree, and I think that those learnings in that time have translated into now post university.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, what was really key is the understanding of it. It's to understand what is going on from not only a psychological perspective, but a physiological perspective. And for me, it was really useful to learn those things and to learn how connected your mind and body are. And that just because your body has a certain reaction doesn't mean you have to default to a certain mental reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm being a little bit vague. What I mean here is that when you have an elevated heart rate, when your breath gets a little short, your brain can then categorize that as anxiety. And those are the signals, those are the cues that it uses to prepare itself. But, it's very different, those cues in the context of thousands of years ago is getting chased by a lion and getting that, those effects versus, I got to reply to a client email. Like, it's not that deep. The world will not end. And I guess that's what I've done to safeguard my mental health, is to acknowledge that it all doesn't matter. Like, yes, I want to be the best I can be. Yes, I want to achieve really high results. But at the end of the day, the world will continue to spin. And that gives me a lot of peace. That lets me understand that when I do have, short breath, when my heart rate is going, when I know there's more cortisol in my blood system, it just lets me calm down and kind of just step to the side and say, well, tomorrow's a new day. Like, the world won't end. So that's okay. I don't know if I really answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Really think though that is a lot easier said than done, right? Like we all know, everybody knows that. I know the world's going to continue. I know that like I have all these other things like my health and my family or whatever it is, But I really feel that in the middle of it, it's easier said than done when you're in a crazy work. If, let's pretend one day for you, like a crazy working world, because it's so easy to get just caught up, I think, in everything that's going on and caught
Yeah.
up with salary and money and
Yeah.
success.
I guess I'm also just really fortunate to be at a place and in a position that I really enjoy.
Hmm.
So I think maybe my opinion would be a little bit different if I was at a place like a big corporation that I just felt like I was a
Hmm.
cog in the machine. I'd probably not feel this way. So,
Well, I think what you're alluding to that's so important is if you struggle with mental health challenges, you might not have the privilege of certain careers. I'll give you an example. So, my daughter has had anxiety. I have said to her, you can never become a family lawyer. You can't become a family lawyer. The amount of stress, the amount of like trauma you're dealing with, it's cutthroat. It would be the worst thing for her soul. So I've talked to her about like safeguarding in terms of you need to find something that is going to fill your cup as a career, that is going to support your own wellness and that will not give you a place of high anxiety for your life, because you can't live like that.
yeah, I guess I'd push back on that a bit, wherein I just want to understand your opinion a little bit more. Are you saying generally there are categories that you probably shouldn't go into? Or are you saying it's a case by case basis, depending on the person?
I think it's a case by case
Okay.
depending on personality types and mental health disorders. I do think that there's a lot of careers we could list off that are
Mm-hmm.
very high pressure. And
Mm-hmm.
if you struggle with high level of anxiety, and if you are somebody that is a tender soul, it might be soul ripping. I do think we could list professions that are of that caliber.
Mm-hmm.
Like family law, I'd love somebody to tell me I'm wrong on this. I don't know how you're in family law and you're dealing with custody cases and you're dealing with like really rough divorces. My friend just spent $1 million on a divorce. No kid, 1 million. How is that not totally cutthroat? I might be naive. Like I might be wrong on that, but
Yeah.
anyway.
I guess I don't know if I agree. From the perspective of, well, everyone's so different that what brings stress for one might, maybe the family divorce court is a bad example, but what brings stress for some might bring joy to another. What
Then that's the
might cause,
personality type, though. That's I said to personality type that comes in with that.
okay, I I guess what my pushback is coming from, I hate limited mindsets.
Yeah.
I hate excuses. And I guess what I have really tried really hard to do in my journey with mental health is not to use it as a crutch. So I think that's a slippery slope. I think I understand the nuance of your take there, but I think some people will hear that and take it as an excuse for I can't achieve XYZ because of how I am. And to me that doesn't sit right with
Yeah.
me.
That
So
is
I guess
such a
I just want to draw like a little
Oh,
asterisk
that's
beside what
good.
you're saying.
No, I love it. I love it. That is such a good discussion. I mean, we can't veer off on that too much, but I really think it's an interesting discussion because in my mind, it's not limiting. My mind is having realistic boundaries when you know your limitations, realistically, that align with mental health and align with personality types. That's my lens on it. So, for example, I've talked about this with my daughter, is that we know that there's a genetic component to the anxiety. We know there's a genetic component there. So it's not just circumstantial. So that means you safeguard that your entire life. You will never get away from not safeguarding. I think when there's that genetic component on it. Now we know that you don't have to live with it. We know that there are ways around it, but I also feel that there's some then realistic boundaries of what you will and will not want to take on, also coupled with personality though. It's interesting. Hey, that's it. I've never thought
Maybe that
about
should be our
that.
third episode. We'll debate that.
Totally. You could think too on that more because I really do. Like, I love that you're challenging me on it. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm all about growth mindset too. Like, I'm huge into growth mindset. Huge, huge. I mean, look at me now, right? I'm in a growth crazy, like to a fault growth mindset. I don't see that the same as knowing realistic limitations and abilities and aptitudes. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that then makes me question, well, what is realistic? Right? Like, well, what is that standard?
yeah.
But That's a
Okay, you and
conversation
I,
for maybe
you're going to
episode
think
3.
about it and you're going to talk about this later because I
Yeah.
really do like that question. Okay, we're now moving to 3 wrap-up questions. All right, we're going to 3 wrap-up questions. So here's number 1. This question's leading, but I'm asking it anyways. I know that this is not supposed to be a good interview question, but I actually like the question that much. I can do another question if you refuse this one. How can having mental health challenges potentially avoid work burnout? And by the way, I researched this. Like, what are the biggest concerns at work? It's stress, it's exhaustion, it's reduced performance, it's concerns over work-life balance. I'm reading here. It's career growth anxiety and burnout. So given that we know these are biggest concerns in the work world, how could potentially having mental health challenges mitigate all that?
I don't know if I fully understand.
So let's back up. Do you feel that if you are struggling with, say, anxiety, it could actually help you avoid burnout in your career? So then that's my question. So how? Because I actually think, I so strongly believe that it could be beneficial. That's what it is. So my question is, how do those challenges potentially mitigate stress, burnout?
Yeah. I think what dealing with some of those mental health challenges that I previously dealt with, it taught me a couple things. But one thing that it taught me that really translated well to corporate world, and I think it'll translate well to a lot of different things as well, is it taught me a level of grit and resilience.
Okay.
Because there were a lot of days as I was going through understanding my mental health and, trying to get better at dealing with my mental health struggles. There were a lot of days where you don't want to do something, but you force yourself to do it anyways because you know it's the right thing to do. So I guess that's what has really helped for me. Like, I don't mind a long day at the office. Why? Because I've already had long weeks of dealing with, depression, not getting out of your bed, and just kind of, rotting away. So to me, what's another couple extra hours at the office to get something done? Water off a duck's back at that point. So I guess it really helped me with, if you're able to deal with something as stressful as, depression or whatever it may be, well, the client report, it's not going to be that bad in comparison. So yeah, I think that's what it helped me with.
What I was thinking when I asked the question, because I really do believe that there's good in the fire, is and tell me what you think of this. This is just only my observations. Is I wonder if it puts you in the position of a high level of awareness of safeguarding. You're automatically, your radar's up. You have to safeguard. So therefore, all those incidences of stress, of anxiety, of burnout could maybe be alleviated because your radar is up.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit more.
Okay. It's just a thought I had. Okay, here's the number 2. How can companies support young people entering the workforce in terms of fostering wellness? I know you mentioned it earlier with your company. I want you to just kind of hone that down for me. Can you give me 3 things that companies need to be doing to foster wellness in you young 20-somethings, Gen Zers coming into work?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for my entire generation because I think it's going to be different for different people. But from my perspective, what I would value in terms of my wellness would be, 1, being treated like an adult. No matter the experience, we're all here to accomplish, the same goals. So, don't treat me like a kid, which I'm very thankful. From the first second, they treated me like an adult, even though it was my first corporate role. So I really appreciated that. Number 2, I would say, is transparency. I don't like all the fluff and the BS, and just tell it to me how it is, and let's have a conversation about how we can, find a win-win if there is one. So, I've had difficult conversations with, my managers about, I want X promotion, I want Y, and it's just a conversation. It's not you versus me. It's us trying to find a solution. So I love the transparency. I absolutely detest some of the stories I've heard from these big corporations. I'll tell you one thing at your 1 p.m. meeting, and at your 5 p.m. meeting, you're laid off. So I think just having an expectation set and some transparency goes a long way. And that kind of goes back to being an adult. I think you're treated as if you're a child if they feel like they can't tell you everything, if they feel like they can't have an adult conversation about the hard stuff. So I think those are the two things that have been really key for me, is being treated like an adult. And then kind of like, that's a 1A. The 1B to that is transparency.
My nephew's staying with us for 4 months and he's working at a large accounting firm downtown. And he said his very first day as an intern, they had a huge mental health talk in terms of you've got support here. This is your number one. Your wellness is more important than the job. I was like, wow, I want to talk to the guy that does this. That was Dave. Like, it was one of their very first conversations. And he's got copious amounts of psychological services support. Just, they value it. So it's been transparent for him from day one, is this is a focus for us. We want you all well. And I'm really impressed. It's a company that just really values supporting that and dialoguing about it then, right? Okay, here is my last question, Darian Hooshi. If you could change one thing in the corporate world, and not necessarily, I'm not talking about your work necessarily, because you're at a nice startup with lovely people who I've spoken to, and I was your reference to get that job, by the way.
Thank you.
So what's the one thing, though, that you could change, just sweeping generalization, that would better support mental health challenges across the board? And this is a very sweeping generalization that I know that you don't like, but just give it to me.
Yeah, I guess my advice wouldn't be for the corporations, it'd be for the people at the corporations. And my advice would be, if you're not happy, leave. This kind of goes back to maybe I don't speak for everyone, but it kind of goes back to the self-belief of, I will figure it out. No matter what it is, I will figure it out. So if it comes to it, I'm so unhappy, I'll leave. I'll go figure it out. I'll go do something else. That's okay. And I feel like, and don't get me wrong, easier said than done. Some people have, financial obligations where they can't leave. And I want to be very empathetic to those people as well, and understand that not everyone has the privilege to be able to have that flexibility. But for a lot of people, especially my generation, I think they feel like they have to be at their job. They have to be at a big corporation. You don't. I don't think so. So for me, it's that I think a lot of people are unhappy, but they're not willing to do anything about it. And that's what's frustrating to me, is so if somebody wants to have a conversation to fix their problem, I'm all there. If somebody just wants to have a conversation about their problem, but do nothing about it, I have no patience for.
I just want to add on that the older you get, the less likely it is to do the risk and vulnerability involved of changing careers. I just had a conversation with this awesome guy named Wilson, who I've done a podcast with. And I said to him, in our 50s, people stay put now and just do your time till retirement. Can I give you my response on the number one thing workplaces could change?
I'd love it. Yeah, please.
Bring in my research. Be supportive. But I mean it, though. I'm actually not trying to plug it. I believe in this in corporate, is support, understanding, care. We offer support as a company. We are understanding where we listen authentically, not just for the sake of it. And we're caring for our employees.
Yeah.
Which I think your company's doing.
Absolutely. And I think understanding, to me, understanding, transparency, those are essentially one and the same in the context of this conversation. Yeah. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
That was not a research plug. It was, I believe so much that it is so universal of what we all need. Support, understanding, care.
So I'm not getting that e-transfer later for agreeing? Kidding.
You and I, we're going to talk later though about that big debate question of like, are you narrowing your field with just can't work in certain spots? Darian Hooshi, thank you so much for your time, second time around. I hope this met your expectations of a different sort of a discussion.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much, Suzanne, for all the work you're doing and all the work you're going to continue to do to have these conversations. So thank you.
Thanks, Darian. Thanks for listening. And now you can do something about this. You can share this episode with somebody you know who has been struggling with mental health and wants affirmation that it is okay to share with our friends and coworkers of how we're doing, because there is so much support that is offered back. And also click like on that little link below, subscribe to this channel, and leave any comments that you want to discuss or any future episodes that you would like to see. Join me next time.